Javier gazes at the Gigatitan, expressing his determination to stay alive until they defeat it and trusting Master Lloyd's plans. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera reflects on the successful survey leading to the formulation of Plan D. Implementing the plan has been challenging due to the Gigatitan being faster than expected. Still, he believes they must persevere with Plan D until the end. He sees it as the only way to defeat the Gigatitan once and for all, combining elements of both Plan A and Plan D. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera calls Pipodong, who swiftly runs toward him. Lloyd jumps on Pipodong's back and instructs him to take him to the place he mentioned earlier. Addressing Javier, he emphasizes that the Gigatitan currently sees him as the biggest threat, and he needs to lure it along the east coast and into the woods. Javier agrees and starts running. Lloyd believes he has bought them enough time and trusts Count Cremo should have finished whatever task they assigned him. He thinks Count Cremo can handle it. The scene shifts 15 minutes earlier, where Count Cremo stands in his place and observes the Gigatitan emerging from the river. He expresses disbelief, questioning how something like this could happen. His subordinate apologizes, suggesting that if only he had detected it sooner. Count Cremo refuses to blame him, stating it's not his fault. He acknowledges his complacency and blames himself for believing that he could drive out the beast with a statue, looking at the broken statue. His subordinate asserts that no, the statue will indeed repel it, and he inquires Lloyd Frontera if he is safe while riding on Bengal. Frontera responds that the monster has come ashore to finish off the statue without a doubt. They plan to capitalize on its obsession with the statue. He mentions that Javier and he will buy some time, and he states that meanwhile he needs to go. Javier rushes to attack Gigatitan repeatedly, gasping for breath, realizing he is reaching his limit. He acknowledges he can't do any more and believes his current mission is to lure Gigatitan away, not just for the city but for the people. He makes another attempt to attack and urges everyone to give it up for the only bronze statue. Spotting a cart, Lloyd Frontera arrives with the statue, securing it with numerous strips and smiling annoyingly. Javier questions what this is, and Frontera replies to Gigatitan that he has brought its real enemy. Gigatitan roars upon seeing them. He thinks, okay, let's appreciate that reaction, and acknowledges they did a great job putting this thing back together as he observes his soldier diligently fixing the statue. From the book, he knew he could trust Count Cremo to handle this. He shouts Javier's name and declares that he'll create an opening for him to attack. Javier replies, requesting that next time he explains the entire plan. The response is a warning that there better not be a next time. Both of them run in opposite directions to launch their attacks. Gigatitan roars loudly behind the Pipodong, causing fear, and the individual flees. Simultaneously, Javier approaches from another side, leaps to attack, employs a mana blast, throws fire at Gigatitan, and strikes with full force, hurling the creature to the ground. He reflects that he has only cracked a small hole in its shell. He used his mana blast too many times, but he dismissed that as an excuse. He considers himself too weak and believes he is not strong enough to protect the people as he falls down. Lloyd Frontera arrives, commending him for the achievement and instructing him to leave the rest to him, then rushes to attack Gigatitan. Javier reflects that he exerted all the remaining energy into that last mana blast. Now he is losing consciousness and believes he can rest easy. His sword slips from his hand. Lloyd Frontera, running, shouts for Javier to leave it to him. Frontera thinks confidently because Master Lloyd said so. Rolling on Pipodong, Frontera reassures Javier that he will protect the city no matter what. He contemplates if it's possible, recalling that it's what he shouted to Javier as he dashed towards the beast. To be honest, he doesn't think it's feasible, and perhaps he can only lure the creature far away and leave it there. He considers that there's no guarantee the beast won't return, especially since the waters off Cremo are already Gigatitan's habitat, and the creature is quite intelligent. Observing Gigatitan attacking the city, he speculates that it might go berserk and seek revenge for them summoning the Marmon statue. He reconsiders, realizing that before that happens, Pipodong is already at his limit, and he can't ask him to do any more. Meanwhile, Pipodong is called by him to handle the task. Swiftly, he halts and tosses Pipodong into the river. Prepared to launch an attack, he contemplates what he can execute successfully at the moment. He reflects on his previous decision to save the city, ensuring a profitable return on his investment. He had formulated a couple of plans involving attacking while riding on Bengal. Considering his options, he acknowledges the necessity of performing a mana blast. However, to execute this attack, he requires a triple heart circle, yet presently, he possesses only a double heart circle. Shouting out, he summons a message alert or skill window to activate the SSS core technique. He resolves to level up to a triple heart circle, while the skill window informs him that the SSS core technique at double heart circle level 4 is activated. For the upgrade, he needs 190 RP points, and his current RP stands at 19 Contemplating the requirement of 190 RP points, he deems it a considerable amount. Deciding to proceed nonetheless, he clicks on the level up option. The system once again informs him that the SSS core technique at double heart circle level 5 necessitates 220 RP points for advancement. He coughs, reflecting on the increment of 30 points each time, finding it steep. Nevertheless, he dismisses any concerns, deciding that there's nothing to lose anyway. He repeatedly clicks on the level up option, advancing to levels 6, 7, 8, 9, and finally 10. Upon reaching level 10, the requirement surges to 370 RP points. Checking his current RP, he discovers it's only 311. Frustrated, he realizes there's nothing he can do now. His rational decision at the time was to stay out of the battle. He hangs on with a rock and ponders what he's doing here, dangling from this thing while witnessing Pipodong taking Javier away in an unconscious state. He contemplates whether he should summon some mana and jab it. If there's even a slight nick, he can dig his way into it. The system notifies him that his approval rating with Javier has increased by +4, and his approval ratings are +5. He observes that for a level up, he needs 370, and currently he has 391 RP points. He thinks he can do it now with a triple heart circle. He taps on the level up options, and a triple circle appears at his heart. The system notifies him that he is at a SSS core technique triple heart circle level 1, and his mana is amplified to 500%. He exclaims he's dead meat and prepares to attack. He considers using one circle to protect the heart while employing the other 2 heart circles for mana blast attacks. He launches an attack on Gigatitan while a stone hits his head, causing him to bleed. Meanwhile, he wonders if he has been struck by something. Realizing that it's not good, he acknowledges the need to land a solid blow. He believes one circle is necessary to protect the heart. Confused about the other 2 circles, he questions himself about what he is doing. The heart circles are colliding, and he decides to use the triple core mana blast to attack once again. A massive explosion occurs, burning Gigatitan and causing his demise. People in the city witness the blast. Pipodong, Haming, and Bengal return to their real state and attempt to revive Javier. As he gets up, he sees that Master Pipodong and Master Haming are safe and sound. He expresses that he indeed accomplished what he said he would, but he is puzzled about how he achieved it. Pipodong grabs his finger to gain his attention, and he inquires about it, asking if Pipodong wants him to follow. The 3 of them run towards Lloyd Frontera, with Javier following. They find Lloyd in a worse condition, lying on the ground. Javier approaches him, puts his head on Lloyd's chest to check his heartbeat, and sadly remarks that his heart has stopped. A pigeon arrives at Baron Palace with a message, catching the attention of Arcos Frontera. He sits at his study table, spots the pigeon, and identifies it as a messenger pigeon. He opens the window to retrieve the message, wondering if it's from Count Cremo and expressing curiosity about its contents. After reading the message, he swiftly mounts his horse and heads toward Cremo City. He reflects on how he had repeatedly warned Lloyd not to put himself in perilous situations. Recalling the message that informed him of his eldest son, Lloyd Frontera, successfully completing all the construction work needed in Cremo, he feels a sense of concern. Marbella decides to accompany him, expressing surprise at his sudden departure without any preparations. She questions how he could leave so unexpectedly, looking at her and Bayern. Meanwhile, Arcos Frontera informs her that it will be a long journey without any breaks, and he intends to go alone with Bayern. She questions what he is talking about, expressing that he seems to have forgotten that she rides much better than him. Arcos thinks, however, that immediately afterward, Cremo faced a grave peril during which Lloyd Frontera and his guard, Sir Javier Asraran, saved many lives through acts of sacrifice and valor. Master Lloyd then fell into a bizarre unconscious state, prompting everyone to quickly move to Cremo. Reflecting on the past, Arcos recalls that Lloyd Frontera used to be a despicable boy, but now he has become the most diligent and trustworthy son. He believes he is sending this correspondence as a duty to inform him of the situation promptly and looks forward to meeting the parents of such a great young man soon. He recalls that Lloyd Frontera said he had come seeking his lord's permission, reassuring them not to fear as it can be done. He would like to express his gratitude to his lord for his wise judgment. Arcos wonders if he is truly his son. Meanwhile, a giant monster blocks their way and growls. They all gaze at it, and Bayern dismounts from his horse, drawing his sword. He declares that since they have chosen the shortcut, they must confront the monster head-on. Bayern offers to buy them some time, instructing them to go around the creature and head toward Cremo. Arcos advises him to run as well, but Bayern insists that the beast is faster than their horses. He warns that the moment they turn around, the monster will have them by their throats. Bayern urges them to run away as he attempts to defeat the monster, attacking it with his skills. They both run away, and Arcos Frontera apologizes, assuring them that they will meet again in Cremo. Bayern runs and attacks the monster, stabbing its face and holding his sword still, attempting to slice it. The monster tries to escape and pushes him away with its face. Arcos Frontera comes from behind and stabs the monster in the back. Marbella also joins in, stabbing the monster. The creature stands up, roaring in pain, and then falls down and dies. Arcos Frontera approaches Bayern, asking if he can stand up and offer help. Bayern replies that he's ashamed, as he is his guard, yet he holds his injured arm. Arcos Frontera asserts that Bayern is also one of his subjects, and he has a duty to protect him. Marbella calls out to Arcos, who turns to look at her, asking if she is hurt. They notice a pack of monsters approaching, and they prepare to fight. Bayern gets up, holding his sword. Marbella goes to Arcos, and they hug each other, visibly scared. Meanwhile, Javier arrives there and attacks the monsters, swiftly cutting them into slices. He mentions that he came to escort them just in case, expressing hope that they are not injured, and puts his sword back. Bayern looks at him and reflects that he already knew Javier's swordsmanship and Mana's abilities were far beyond his own. However, they were not at this level prior to his departure for Cremo, leaving him puzzled about how Javier could have improved this much. Bayern greets Javier, and Marbella also inquires about Lloyd Frontera's well-being. Javier bows down in front of them and replies that he doesn't know. He can't tell if Lloyd is alive or not. He goes into a flashback where Lloyd Frontera kills Gigatitan and also becomes unconscious. Javier comes closer to him while Pipodong, Hameng, and Bangle try to wake Lloyd up. Javier thinks that if he leaves them now, their estate, his newly found home, would be lost. He grabs Lloyd's hand and tries to check his pulse. After a few minutes, he thinks there is a pulse, but his heart has definitely stopped. It's faint, but he's breathing, and Javier wonders how this can be happening. He puts his hand on Lloyd's chest, realizing that it's a triple heart circle. They are all spinning around at an unbelievable speed, and he can't judge the condition of Lloyd's heart due to the magnetic field. The strong mana rotations are keeping Lloyd alive in the place of his heart. Javier concludes that a triple-core mana blast is responsible for how Gigatitan came to be that way and acknowledges that Master Lloyd is truly strong. The scene shifts to the city where people are once again repairing their houses. Bayern, Arcos Frontera, and Marbella arrive with Javier, and they look around. Javier informs them that the young master is at the Count's manor, and a doctor is tending to him, but his condition has not improved. Arcos Frontera expresses how terrible it is to think that it was just him and Lloyd fighting against the monster. Javier refuses to take credit, stating that he was merely the sword that Master Lloyd was wielding, and that it was Master Lloyd's strength that vanquished the monster. Marbella wonders where Lloyd is and how their son has that sort of power. A person asks if they are all heading to the Count's manor too. Another person responds affirmatively, saying that they can't do much, but it is the least they can do for him and Lloyd Frontera. If not for Lloyd, he would have frozen to death by now, even as he was rushing towards the Gigatitan. He mentions that he doesn't know how many people he saved. Another person adds that he thought he was doomed to die buried beneath all that rubble and had given up, awaiting death. On the other side, Lloyd Frontera instructs Bangle to eat up that debris and make sure not to hurt anyone while riding on Pipadong. He spots a soldier under a broken house. Marbella notes that the embers must have spread from fireplaces because of the statue fragments. A lady approaches her and mentions that if left alone, this whole area would have been engulfed in flames. She recalls seeing the giant hippopotamus that appeared during construction, spewing out water and extinguishing the fire. The lady adds that she saw it as well. That's the summons called forth by the man named Lloyd. She emphasizes that right now in the city, who knows how many people owe him their lives. After a while, the whole city gathers in front of the palace, and they all pray that their parents, kids, wives, and everyone's savior will open their eyes. The town pot stirrer shouts, questioning if all of them have lost their senses. He asserts that if only that man had not made a platform for that statue, none of this would have happened. Ultimately, it's all his fault. Everyone looks at him surprisingly. They think the town pot stirrer appears and gets upset when left out, and the public becomes agitated. People start gossiping and beating him. They think he is swiftly suppressed. On the other side, a flash appears in Lloyd's heart, and the system notifies him that his courage and sacrifice have deeply moved the people of Cremo. He will receive an enormous reward for this achievement and shows another option to click here for more details. Lloyd Frontera opens his eyes, gets up, and says his head really hurts. He remembers using the triple core mana blast like a fool and asks if he is alive right now. The system notifies him that probably if he were dead, he wouldn't even be able to have a dream. He asks if his heart shouldn't have exploded, and the system again notifies him that he will find that out soon enough. It emphasizes that there is something much more important to check on right now. He agrees, and Javier enters his room. He tells Javier that he's just the man he wanted to see and asks when they said they would pay them for the construction. Javier replies that it seems he is in good health now. Arcos Frontera and Marbella enter the room and rush towards him, hugging him tightly. They both become emotional, and his father asks if he is okay. His mother expresses her relief and asks if he has any idea how worried they are. She wonders if he is really their Lloyd, acknowledging that the unsettling question isn't what's important right now. She thinks she is just thankful that he is alive. The scene shifts to the royal capital Magenta. Her Royal Highness, the Empress Alicia Termina Magentano, states that Count Cremo's letter reports the complete destruction of Gigaton. She finds it intriguing to learn that such a man exists in her kingdom. She orders a messenger to be sent to the Frontera barony and bring both this man and his guard back to the royal capital. Her subordinate bows and says, as his wish, His Majesty. She remarks that they should see if the contents of this letter are indeed true, expressing her intention to meet this man and judge for herself. The system notifies that the stories of his great courage, wisdom, and self-sacrifice are spreading all over the land. Lloyd looks at this message and says he's uninterested because he has received bonus RP for his elevated social status, and his bonus RP reaches plus 1500. He becomes excited to see this, and the system again notifies him that he has access to skill information, providing details about the skill Mana Heart that allows him to store high concentrations of mana in his heart. He thinks that's why he has so much energy despite being in a coma for a month, and he has become the owner of a mana heart, which means shoveling will be a lot easier. The system notifies if that's the only thing he can think of to use it on. Meanwhile, he asks if he is belittling all the construction workers of this land. The system replies, asking him to forgive it, stating that of course not. His mana heart was born, not as a result of regular training, but from the impact of the mana blast. As such, his mana heart has been given unique capabilities. The system notifies him again about a skill option, Shock Neutralizer, which can neutralize the impact from mana blasts without additional protection. He wonders what this is and asks if this means he can use the triple core blast as much as he wants. He thinks that means the work in the quarry can be done faster. The system responds, urging him to think of something more impressive. He asks if there is anything more noble and impressive than manual labor and questions if the system is belittling quarry work. He thinks that the mana heart needs to be protected from the impact of the mana blast because it acts like an ammunition dump. Using a mana blast is like setting off an explosion next to one of those powder kegs. It is literally a death trap if he doesn't protect it. But at that moment, he didn't have a mana heart. That's why he didn't die. He thinks the shock from the blast filled his heart, and as it was working to keep him alive, it condensed and turned into a mana heart. He thinks he neglected his mana heart training, thinking it was a better use of his time to do more manual labor. He guesses it pays to be lazy sometimes. Count Cremo arrives and says to forgive him for keeping him waiting. He suggests they depart right away, and he confirms. They both sit in a horse cart and move away. He remarks on the buildings and streets, wondering how much it would cost to repair them. Count Cremo replies that it's hard to tell, but he imagines it's well over a month's worth of a city's budget. He adds that if the Gigatitan hadn't been knocked down, he bets it would have been another half a year's worth. Count Cremo asks what he is trying to tell him, and he replies that compared to half a year's budget, what he's getting for this construction project must be like small change, that's all. He laughs and says, his goodness, who would have known? He goes on to say that to think that this tragedy was the result of some statue made to drive the Gigatitan away. Regardless of whose plan it was, he can't say it was anyone's fault. Really, it was Mother Nature. Either way, a few people did have to risk their lives, but everything worked out very well in the end, and he laughed. He mentions that he knows. He did happen to hear something from his attendants. He heard that his lordship offers financial compensation to anyone who works for the public interest of the city, regardless of who they are, without fail. He adds that he was rather curious, wondering how much of a benefit to public interest would lead to 1-5 times. Count Cremo asks if that will do, and he replies that he does apologize. It seems he has caused a misunderstanding, and he wasn't asking for more money, but anyway, he finally gets it. He says to him, his citizens' lives are worth 1-5 times his construction fees. Count Cremo sits quietly and listens to him, saying 2-fold then 3-fold. He reaches to him and smiles. He says he's in awe of his bold generosity, and he will consider this special compensation and put it to good use on himself. He shakes hands with Count Cremo. Count Cremo agrees and says of course. He thinks this is strange, so very strange, he has most definitely been extorted by him. Lloyd Frontera reflects, yet he doesn't harbor any hatred, pondering why such animosity doesn't exist. Observing the carriage, a person remarks that Count Cremo's carriage, and excitement sweeps over them, exclaiming Master Lloyd has arrived, 3 cheers for him, hooray. Glancing out of the window, he contemplates his past insignificance in Korea and feels the immense pressure of the present situation. Count Cremo informs him that they have arranged a podium with a magic crystal ball for amplification, and the people eagerly await to hear what he has to say. Lloyd acknowledges, of course, while thinking that the true heroes are those who overcame the tragedy, and a speech emphasizing this would suffice. He adds it's not like he's making money off this. Lloyd Frontera arrives at the stage amid people shouting slogans with his name. Despite the crowd's enthusiasm, he remains uninterested, wondering about the magnitude of the gathering as he places his hand on the magical ball. Contemplating the potential financial gain from each person present, he addresses the citizens of Cremo, asking if they have ever heard of Ondal flooring. Tapping his head, he notes their unfamiliarity and points out an elderly man with stiff joints enduring freezing winter cold and a worried mother fearing her child catching a cold. He questions how much time they have wasted struggling with their inefficient fireplaces, exclaiming 1 hour and 2 hours. If they've lived 50 years, that would be 15 wasted in front of a fire. Asserting that if they consider this excessive, he urges them to remember Ondal flooring, all while Count Cremo laughs. He states that it will improve their lives by this much, gesturing with his hand and then widening it further, emphasizing the substantial impact. He adds for more information, please visit the Baron's Manor location in the Frontera Barony. That is all before walking away. Count Cremo observes him and reflects on why he doesn't harbor any hatred towards him. He realizes it's because the man is meticulous in seeking every penny of profit, persistent yet reasonable, and accomplishes what needs to be done. Considering his qualities, Count Cremo thinks that instead of harboring resentment, he wants a man of such caliber by his side. A man of his skills being stuck in a remote village is seen as a loss to the kingdom. Lloyd contemplates his soon-to-be Golden Goose, the Frontera estate, and its most senior knight, Sir Bayern. While acknowledging Bayern's honesty, integrity, and sincerity, he notes that as a knight, Bayern's skills are only average, perhaps slightly below average. Lloyd finds this to be a pity as he looks at him. Bayern informs Lloyd that all the plans for the migration are in place, presenting him with the documents containing lists of names and details on land allocation. He further addresses the farm owner's complaints about the labor shortage, revealing his decision to send in the orcs to bolster the workforce at the mine. Bayern mentions that they have also signed a large-scale Ondal agreement with a neighboring estate, offering a 30% discount and leaving their net profit margin at only 10%. Despite this, when factoring in the sale of the coal afterward, their final profits are expected to exceed 50%. Meanwhile, he proceeds to discuss water pipe insulation and repairs. Lloyd Frontera interrupts, asking if he managed to complete all that in the time he was away. The response is that he was simply following orders. He was instructed to take care of the rest. a soldier arrives, seeking an update, informing them that the interior work in the last Ondal project is complete and awaiting inspection. Bayern acknowledges, stating that he'll be there in 30 minutes. As they go out to check the project, Bayern remarks that it is well made with no flaws, a commendable job. He reflects on the times he raised his voice, considering them as leading up to this moment, and acknowledges that the individual has become the most important person on their traveling build team. Lloyd Frontera looks at him and acknowledges his capability, thinking he is extremely capable and born in the wrong era. He contemplates that if the man were in Korea, he would have been, at least, a managing director at a big corporation. Acknowledging his skills, Lloyd decides that he needs to give this man a huge bonus. The system notifies him that the installation of Ondal flooring in the Frontera Estate's homes is complete, marking a new page in the continent's history books. Ondal is now recognized as the Frontera heating system, and a substantial amount of RP will be awarded for this monumental achievement in construction. His bonus RP reaches plus 400. Reflecting on this, he realizes that the large-scale Ondal flooring contract was orchestrated by the Baron and Baroness. These two, it turns out, possess talents beyond being the lord and lady of an estate, and he gazes at his parents. Contemplating his own life, he acknowledges that from the moment he was born, his luck began. For many people, whether they laugh or cry depends on the era they are born into. After a while, Lloyd Frontera and Javier arrive at their construction site and observe the structure of a building. Javier remarks on the need for such a large storage building for all the coal. Lloyd responds, confirming that indeed they do need it as the coal supply keeps increasing. He reflects on having paid off more than half the debt with the money from construction and mentions their substantial income from water supply fees charged to their neighbor. Thinking that he's almost there, approaching his retirement of fun and merriment, he smiles. Javier looks at him and contemplates that sometimes he can't stand it when he makes that face, finding himself suddenly wanting to punch him. Suddenly, they hear a horn whistle and turn towards the sound. Lloyd inquires about the noise, and Javier replies that he, too, has never heard it before but believes it to be the horn announcing the arrival of the royal messenger. He inquires about the presence of the royal messenger as he observes a caravan of royal messengers. The messenger dismounts from his horse and presents a message, with his subordinates applauding his presentation. Lloyd Frontera becomes angry, questioning the ridiculous performance and urging the messenger to get to the point. He and his parents bow in front of the messenger, and he senses that this encounter might lead to trouble. The royal messenger states that since time immemorial, he, along with the great sovereigns before him, has worked hard to achieve peace and comfort for nobles, citizens, and all others. Lloyd thinks about the events in Cremo, wondering if that is the reason for the messenger's visit. The royal messenger clarifies that not only is it about Cremo, but they are also relieved to hear of their people's safety. It is his responsibility to report to the royals. Additionally, for these reasons, he will personally greet the two valiant heroes who defeated the Gigatitan and praise them for their achievement. The system notifies that favor with the Baron has increased by 9, and he has received 90 RP points. Arcos Frontera becomes emotional, stating this is an honor, His Majesty, and commends his son for a good job. However, he becomes irritated, thinking that while he appreciates the RP points, this situation is not ideal. Reflecting on his past experiences in the army, he realizes the importance of doing just enough to avoid problems and never doing more than necessary. He recalls breaking that rule once. In another scenario, Major asks Corporal Kim, who is a civil engineering major, to construct a sauna in a particular spot. Corporal Kim responds by stating that civil engineering isn't about being a builder. The major then questions whether he is refusing to do the task. Corporal Kim declines to refuse and asserts that he will do it. Meanwhile, Corporal Kim sits at his study table, reading a book, and reflects on the fatal mistake he made. He thinks he researched too hard and ended up building something that was way too perfect. The scene shifts to the National Defense Sauna, where a soldier approaches and asks if Corporal Kim, who looks pretty brainy, could build a nice little cottage for them. The soldier questions why the village levee broke and criticizes the flimsiness of the barrack. He mentions that the mountain is ruining the beautiful view and instructs someone to fetch Corporal Kim. Observing the situation, the royal messenger thinks that once Her Royal Highness is involved, the sweet life of the country noble will come to an end. The royal messenger declares that Lloyd Frontera and his guard are hereby ordered to travel immediately to the royal capital. Lloyd Frontera reflects that he should have just constructed the sea platform and ended it there. The cursed lobster has put a curse on him. He contemplates the consequences, thinking that once he's on her radar, she'll call on him for the rest of his life. Considering whether he should pretend to be an idiot, he concludes that it's dangerous. If she takes offense, he might lose his head. Sitting in his carriage with Javier beside him, Javier observes Lloyd and remarks that he has the face of a man who is about to be executed. Lloyd acknowledges Javier's sharp eye. Javier adds that it's unexpected since the Master Lloyd he knows would usually be excited to meet Her Royal Highness. Javier wonders how much he can weasel out of her. Lloyd contemplates that he knows things about this world, Her Highness Magentano's personality, her future, and the state of the capital. If he can take advantage of all that, there has to be a way. He acknowledges that Javier is correct, and they decide to seize the opportunity to make the most of the royal palace. After some time, they arrive at the royal palace and kneel, greeting Her Highness. STmanhwa Magentano addresses Lloyd Frontera and Javier Esrahan. He may lift his gaze, and they both raise their heads. He is impressed, thinking he almost had a heart attack. Her charisma is overwhelming. He declares all hail their majesty, the queen. He, Lloyd Frontera, has come to salute Her Majesty, the rightful ruler of these lands. She inquires if it is him, and from his auras, the man beside him seems noble. She addresses Sir Javier Esrahan and asks if he said so. She senses a mana flow from him that she has never seen before. She remarks that he seems like a worthy sparring partner for her. Javier replies, asking for forgiveness on behalf of His Majesty, stating he is merely a nameless knight. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera thinks she can tell Javier is special just by looking at him and realizes that she is one of the only two sword masters in the kingdom. Clumsy flattery won't work on her. STmanhwa Magentano mentions that she has heard of his deeds from Count C. As such, he has his appreciation for the courage and selflessness he displayed. However, she doesn't judge a man merely based on another's recommendation. She trusts based on another's recommendation and only trusts what she has seen for herself. Lloyd Frontera thinks, confirming his expectations, while she reiterates Lloyd Frontera's name and declares that she will put his skills to the test. He thinks this is the pinnacle, the highest opportunity, nothing less than a chance to win a contract with Her Majesty. In the current state of affairs, she then asks him what construction project he believes is the most urgently needed in Magenta, the royal capital. He thinks she's starting things off with a quiz, contemplating the most necessary construction project, confident that he knows this as he is familiar with the book's entire plot. She contemplates whether he truly is a capable man, expecting him to have noticed the condition of the royal palace the moment he saw it. If he fails to catch that, she decides she will not acknowledge him. Both of them agree that the most urgent construction project in Magenta is the repair of the crumbling palace. He suggests placing a new bridge over the Magenta River, which runs through the capital, but he thinks she might not be completely satisfied with his response. He believes it wasn't the answer she expected, but given her personality, the test won't end there. He acknowledges that she holds the highest authority and absolute power, being tolerant, fair, and willing to listen to all regardless of class or rank. When she asks for his reason, he responds by stating that others may have a different opinion and may argue that repairing the royal palace is the most urgent matter at the moment. He explains that a very long time ago, a badly tempered dragon took off with the palace's tower on 2 separate occasions. To prevent it from happening a third time, the entire structure was widened and flattened into its current shape. He continues, stating that the Magenta Castle they see today was built in this weighty manner due to fears that the whole structure could be lifted up. Consequently, he believes that the weight of the structure pressing down on the ground and its pillars is causing it to slowly crumble. However, he adds that the repairs would only be necessary at a much later date. Therefore, he concludes that it can't be seen as urgent. She looks at him and thinks what an impudent man. He knows what she is thinking, yet he gives her a different answer. He reflects on the fact that she knows that he gave her a different answer, even though he knew the answer she was thinking of. She reflects that she sees he knows that he gave a different answer, even though he knew the answer she was thinking of. He laughs and thinks he knows that she knows that he gave her a different answer, even though he knew the answer he was thinking of. The system notifies him to stop with the nonsense. She wonders if he's toying with her and states that she would never beg for a contract for construction fees. He mentions that the current bridge across the Magenta River Arcos has been rebuilt 12 times already. He explains that the bridge collapses regularly because it is unable to withstand the rising waters in the spring. He adds that each time it happens, people's lives are inconvenienced and large amounts of money are spent on it. He asserts that everyone sees the rebuilding of the bridge as an inevitable part of nature. He says, however, that if Her Majesty were to trust him with its construction, he would build a bridge that would not collapse even in the face of spring floods or drift ice. He believes he is referring to a modern suspension bridge. She thinks he even criticizes her decisions and wonders why this arrogant and insolent man, the more she speaks with him, the more she seems to like him. She asks him to tell her more about the bridge he will construct. He laughs, thanks her, and thinks he knew she would like it. He believes she absolutely despises yes-men who drown her in flattery, and she puts unlimited trust in those with strong convictions. She says enough. He has suddenly lost interest. He thinks this is their queen, Magentano, but she is eventually betrayed by the one she cherished, loses one of her arms, and turns evil, transforming into the butchering tyrant. However, that story is 3 years into the future. Right now, she is an honorable queen who listens even to the lowly. She inquires if the bridge were to fail, while he contemplates that he would gather his things and flee the country. He then states that she can have his head in exchange, but as long as the bridge stands, he requests a guarantee for his family's station. She thinks that he has managed to make her smile in the end and agrees, saying he may carry out his plans. She promises him reasonable compensation and the upholding of his family's station. He steps forward and presents a contract, and she asks what it is. He responds with a contract. Please sign it. She questions whether he is implying that he doesn't trust his word and thinks he has prepared a contract. He clarifies that it's not the case, Her Majesty, and explains that the contract stipulates that if he doesn't construct the bridge in an honest manner, he is to be hung, drawn, and quartered. He mentions that he considers this a necessary shackle for such an untrustworthy and lowly man as himself. She signs the contract and thinks she's being sweet-talked into something, yet she doesn't mind it. He responds with 1,000 thanks while she inquires about his remark concerning his bottom. He explains that he couldn't lower his head any more than his signature, so he raised her behind to make it seem lower. She replies that she understands his intentions but instructs him to lower it, as she doesn't want to see it. Lloyd Frontera, Javier, and another royal servant walk towards them. Lloyd Frontera taps and swirls in excitement, thinking, did he see that? This guy right here just ripped off the queen with this contract. Javier looks at him and thinks he could have lost his head if she thought he was being disrespectful. He adds that he can't stop a sword master, so please exercise caution. Meanwhile, Alicia Termina Magentano remarks that Sir Kyle noticed it as well, realizing he is more shrewd than she had thought. He responds that he's a clever man, very calculating, and asks if she is not slightly displeased by the man. She replies that she was. He assumed from the beginning that he could beat him, but he seemed so pathetic that it was rather adorable, and she smiles. The scene shifts a few days later. Lloyd Frontera puts a bag at his back and says up he goes. Javier asks if he will really be all right going alone, and Lloyd replies why would he need an escort in the capital with all its security. He adds that it's a huge pain walking around with Javier while pointing at him. He mentions that earlier when they went out to survey, he couldn't concentrate at all because of Javier. Lloyd signs the contract while many girls look at them and fall in love with both of them. Javier requests please tell Master Julian that he's doing well. The reply comes yeah, sure thing. The speaker thinks Julian Frontera is Lloyd's little brother studying at the Royal Academy. Before they left for the capital, the Baroness prepared heaps of winter clothes and blankets. Reflecting on this, he thinks she asked him to take them to Julian, feeling emotional as it reminds him of what happens to him in the book. He recalls that around this time in the story, the Baron loses everything and is unable to pay the tuition, getting kicked out of the dorms, and eventually dying wandering around at night, killed by a thief. However, he reassures himself that such an unfortunate fate won't happen now, as he's pretty amazing at saving lives. He looks up at the palace and says well then, time to go see his little brother, realizing he doesn't even know what he looks like. Lloyd Frontera arrives at the Magentano Royal Academy and encounters his brother Julian, who asks what the hell. Lloyd's brother questions what he is doing there. As Lloyd looks at him, he thinks he remembers Julian and Javier being the same age, but Julian is just so small. Julian, in turn, thinks look at that face staring at his own brother like that. Lloyd must have been a piece of work. Lloyd thinks that as long as he's not too nice to Julian and acts like he has turned over a new leaf, maybe he won't be too suspicious. He hands over the bag and says, "Here, it's from Mother." Julian tries to hold the bag and thinks that Lloyd didn't call him a derogatory term, and on top of that, he came all this way because their mother asked him to. The system notifies Lloyd with a warning message that he is considered suspicious due to his uncharacteristic kindness. Lloyd wonders what he did just now that was nice, finding dealing with this Lloyd guy to be so exhausting. Meanwhile, he turns and says all right. Later, he refers to his brother as a little troublemaker, while his brother thinks he has left without confronting him. What's wrong with him? The system notifies him that his suspicions are multiplying, considering his humane behavior. He even recalls calling his brother a little troublemaker. What does he need to do? Hit him in the head? He remembers that his mother asked if he thinks he could have lunch with Julian and considers how lonely Julian must be. He asks what he means and states that he's going to buy Julian lunch. His brother questions why he would do that, and he replies that it's because their mother asked him to. They both go to the cafeteria, and Lloyd Frontera looks at the menu while Lloyd Frontera thinks it's awkward. Julian says he'll have the basic set, and Lloyd cuts in, suggesting he gets something expensive, as he probably doesn't get to indulge like this often. Julian peruses the menu and realizes he forgot to call him a little troublemaker. Later, he articulates it and mentions that he'll go for the special set D. He wonders why he's acting so normal. In the past, he used to curse so much, and he would retaliate even if Julian merely looked at him. He signals the waiter and orders 2 special set DS. The waiter observes that they seem like visitors from out of town and inquires if they would like any wine. Julian declines, mentioning that he doesn't drink anymore. His brother thinks he stopped drinking, recalling that he used to be intoxicated 24 hours a day and caused all sorts of trouble. Reflecting on a recent event, he remembers someone from the palace coming to see him a few days ago. They informed him that the trading port of Cremo was attacked by a Gigatitan, and that Lloyd Frontera was the one who defeated it. He finds it hard to believe that the Lloyd Frontera he knows lacks the skills and mindset to accomplish something like that. He considers it to be either an unfounded rumor or someone falsely taking credit for Javier's accomplishments. At least, that's what he thought, but something felt strange. He seemed like a completely different person while they ate. Diego Lacona arrives, slapping Julian's head and questioning why someone like him is present. Julian apologizes, explaining that something came up today. Diego Lacona presses further, asking what kind of situation arose and questioning if Julian learned anything in his law class. He slaps him again. Diego Lacona inquires about the malleability of the law, wondering if one can break the rules just because they feel like it. He insists that the Baron's scum should dine where they can't be seen and asks why, questioning if it's because they offend people's eyes. Another student remarks that Julian's family is nothing, just because he's in a nice place like this. Someone else questions if Julian thinks he has become something now, labeling him an impoverished piece of trash and questioning what he even possesses on his estate. Julian responds affirmatively, stating that he has his filthy, mangy peasants. Lloyd Frontera reflects that what they call an academy seems to prioritize family status over academic achievements. It annoys him further that the son of a poor country baron ranks near the top of his class. He contemplates the consequences of helping him, realizing that life for him here will only become more challenging. Observing Julian's disapproving glances, he considers sitting still instead. Diego Lacona boasts about his family's royally recognized Lacanada-dyed cloth, stating that one must reach that level to dine there. Lloyd wonders if Diego is a viscount. The system notifies him that the computation for the calculation is complete. Curious, Lloyd Frontera asks about Diego's father's occupation. Diego Lacona declares himself to be the wise and merciful Viscount Lacona, questioning Lloyd Frontera about his connection to the trash present. He commands Lloyd to stop polluting the place and leave, but Lloyd retaliates by slapping him, throwing him away, and making him swirl on the ground. Lloyd believes the attack, Mana Bitch Slap, has a cooldown of 0 seconds, but the system notifies him that it's not a real thing. Another student confronts Lloyd, expressing outrage at interfering with a member of the elite union. Unfazed, Lloyd slaps him as well. A third student rises, claiming to be the second year's top dog, boasting about the mithril fists and threatening that today Lloyd is dead meat. Lloyd defeats him too. Another student questions the source of the disturbance and identifies the troublemakers as the Count's twin sons, known as the Black Dragon's double horns. The student concludes that the troublemaker doesn't stand a chance against their brilliant combined attack. Lloyd Frontera simultaneously slaps both of them and questions if they were the ones talking about some double horns earlier. They deny it, and Lloyd slaps them too. Two more students sit there, trembling, and one admits they didn't say anything but were giggling. Lloyd Frontera approaches their table and slaps both of them, causing their teeth to fly in the air. Diego Lacona stands up, berates Lloyd, tells him to die, and charges at him, asking how he liked being mana punched by a mana prodigy like himself. Lloyd Frontera reflects that he's dealing with Diego Lacona, aged 21, and senses regret in the young man's actions as he licks his blood. Lloyd thinks Diego shouldn't have thrown that punch. Lloyd Frontera seizes Diego Lacona, shakes him, throws him to the ground, and attempts to pull him back. Julian observes, thinking that Lloyd has completely lost it. He never really had it together, and this situation is even worse. Julian acknowledges that he was foolish for believing that Lloyd could be a normal, sane individual even for a moment. He realizes that the vice superintendent was just here, but is now gone. Lloyd Frontera pushes Diego against the wall, expressing his lack of understanding of the current situation and questioning why he's being assaulted. He rejects the notion of the wise and merciful Viscount Lacona, considering it nonsense and remarking on the similarity between father and son. Diego Lacona verbally abuses Lloyd, particularly objecting to the mention of his father. Lloyd persists, questioning if Diego thinks bullying his classmates is acceptable, and he also verbally abuses him. Lloyd forcefully hits Diego's face against the wall repeatedly, asking if he wants him to explain why he behaves like an unpleasant person because there's no one around to instill some sense into him. Lloyd points towards his blood on the wall and asks, "What do they have here? Look at this, what does this look like?" He hits him against the wall again and declares it's gate number 666 to hell for a piece of utter garbage like him. Julian intervenes, grabbing Lloyd from behind and urging him to stop, telling him to knock it off, and questioning if he's trying to kill Diego. Julian reflects on what might happen next, anticipating that Diego will face even more bullying. He acknowledges that Lloyd can be thoughtless, but this is too much. Lloyd Frontera asks if Julian is concerned about Diego being bullied worse after this and reassures him, saying don't worry. If he's dead, he can't bully him. Julian wonders how Lloyd can say that with such a bright smile. Lloyd Frontera reflects that he has encountered many guys like Julian back in high school, thinking that doesn't make him laugh. None make him laugh, and none of it gets through to them. He believes the best thing for them is the fear of death, similar to what Diego Lacona is currently experiencing under the sickle of Death Warrior. Lloyd tells them to stop immediately. Corgidus arrives with a soldier, questioning the meaning of the ruckus in the Sacred Academy funded by Her Royal Highness, while Lloyd Frontera still holds onto Diego Lacona's hair. Julian worries that Lloyd is not only going to confront the dean and the guards but also lose his head in the process, potentially facing beheading. Lloyd Frontera introduces himself, bowing, and states that he is the eldest son of Baron Arcos Frontera and the brother of the student Julian Frontera. He identifies himself as Lloyd Frontera. Julian Frontera wonders why Lloyd is suddenly so calm. It's as if he was anticipating this to happen. Lloyd Frontera offers an apology for causing such a commotion, stating that he was merely attempting to restore Her Majesty's honor. Corgidus dismisses the notion, questioning who dares to tarnish Her Majesty's name, and identifies the person as the son of the Lacona family. Corgidus accuses Lloyd of abusing his brother Julian and humiliating him. Lloyd Frontera stands in the back, insisting that Corgidus must have seen it happen. He claims that Julian looked like he had no intention of restraining him, so he assumes Corgidus didn't see it and laughs. Lloyd reflects that it's apparent why Corgidus didn't intervene. The staff of the academy were all recommended by the nobility, and they likely didn't want to lose the trust of high-ranking aristocrats' children. He considers that the students form regional cliques, which will eventually grow up and influence the academy once again. He contemplates that there's no way anyone on the academy staff, including the men present, was unaware of Julian being bullied, but they likely turned a blind eye. Recognizing himself as the son of a poor baron, he concludes that there's no benefit in helping him. Corgidus questions the relevance of his background to Her Majesty. Lloyd Frontera argues that an insult to his brother is an insult to him. He takes out a mirror from his pocket and shows it to Corgidus. They all express surprise, and Corgidus realizes it's a royal guest specially invited by Her Majesty. They bow in front of him, exclaiming "All hail Her Royal Highness." Lloyd states that he believes they understand the situation and takes his leave, walking out. Corgidus thinks Lloyd is an imbecile and considers that the status of a royal guest is only temporary. They may punish Julian later while treating the beaten-up students better. Lloyd Frontera looks at them and smiles, while Corgidus wonders about the unsettling look, as if he's contemplating harm. Lloyd Frontera turns to his brother and asks what he's doing, urging him to come on. Julian agrees and follows him, inquiring about their destination. Lloyd responds that they are heading to the administrator's office. His brother questions why they are going there, and Lloyd asks what he means, questioning why he wouldn't. He explains that he's going to request a leave of absence for Julian. His brother, frustrated, exclaims how much more of his life he must screw up until Lloyd is satisfied, causing Lloyd to stop. Julian expresses concern that he's going to be bullied even more now because of Lloyd and accuses him of hindering his studies, asking why he is doing this to him. Lloyd Frontera responds that soon, this place won't be very conducive for studying, and he suggests taking the opportunity to give his mind some rest and get his body in shape. His brother asks what he means by getting his body in shape, and Lloyd explains he has never heard the phrase all the muscles. Construction work muscles are the best. The scene shifts to Magentano Palace, royal guests' quarters, where Javier advises Julian to trust Master Lloyd's plan, assuring him that it will turn out for the better. Julian retorts, expressing doubt as it involves Lloyd Frontera, whom he considers a brute, and he believes the plan will only get worse. Javier questions if Julian doesn't believe his words, reminding him of the plan to bring down the Gigatitan in Cremo, claiming it was all Lloyd's plan, and he himself delivered the final blow. He explains that he has built roads, opened waterways, developed quarries and mines, and even formed bonds with wild orcs. He emphasizes that he has successfully paid off more than half of the Baron's extensive debts, all thanks to his skills and talents. He earnestly pleads for their trust, asserting that he is the savior of their estate. Lloyd Frontera stands outside the room, eavesdropping on their conversation, and rubs his nose. Julian expresses difficulty in trusting Lloyd, recalling him as a drunken hooligan and human trash. Javier adds that he was unintelligent, uncivilized, and a dirtbag beyond redemption. Julian questions whether someone can truly change like that. Javier denies the possibility, stating that he has convinced himself that it is impossible. According to him, Master Lloyd Frontera might be someone else disguising themselves. Julian Frontera inquires if Javier is suggesting that someone stole Lloyd's body through black magic or something similar. Javier responds that it could be a possibility, considering it's a theory he read in a book. To determine if there was a flow of mana forcing a foreign soul into the body, he secretly investigated the matter. Lloyd Frontera reflects that Javier did that while Julian asked if there was another soul. Javier denies feeling the presence of any unusual mana force and explains that the soul seemed to be naturally connected to the body. He urges them to forget what he just said, dismissing it as wild speculation. Julian agrees, but he notes that Lloyd suddenly changing like this is even more unexpected. Lloyd Frontera contemplates Javier's statement, considering him a silly devil. He thinks there's no way Javier doesn't sense his presence outside the door, and he wonders if Javier is trying to convey suspicion toward him. Before that, it was the first time Julian heard about their family's debts. Initially, he thought it was just him having a hard time with his studies. However, he realizes that Lloyd has been working all this time to pay off their debts, and surprisingly, Lloyd had the most comfortable life among them. Julian acknowledges that he should give Lloyd some credit for saving their estate. The system notifies Julian that his approval rating for Lloyd has increased by 2 points, and he has received 28 bonus RP, but his overall approval rating is still at -59. Lloyd Frontera considers Julian a key character in his RP fountain, and he accepts it. The system notifies that Julian is opening his heart up to Lloyd, but Lloyd is not touched by that. Lloyd thinks to himself, nope. He doesn't know, whatever, go away. Lloyd Frontera opens the door and enters, finding everything ready, so he suggests they go. Julian Frontera asks where they have to go, and Lloyd replies that he told him to train his body. Lloyd considers step 1 in manufacturing modern suspension bridge cables, involving spreading oil-based clay to make a 3 feet wide pizza dough base. The next step is to top the dough with all kinds of dirt and rocks to complete the pizza, and then Bangle eats that pizza. Lloyd thinks the subsequent steps involve expelling, rolling 120 strands together once the metal wire has cooled, and gathering and rolling the strands, with Peepodong assisting in the rolling process. Lloyd believes that everything is ready to manufacture the cables and concludes the tutorial. He emphasizes that this task is the starting point of the entire construction project, stating that if this part is messed up, everything else will be messed up. Lloyd Frontera expresses concern, stating that not only their estate's debts, but also his future at the academy relies on this task. He questions why he should trust Lloyd with such an important matter. Lloyd responds by stating that he's talking about trust because it's crucial. He believes that someone intelligent and responsible like himself should be in charge, even addressing Julian as a little shit. Julian thinks that Lloyd used the term little shit again, considering it a tad late. Lloyd contemplates the modern suspension bridge, acknowledging it as a fanciful idea with the current era's technical knowledge. He acknowledges that even if he does everything in his power, it would still be impossible. Therefore, he concludes that he needs to borrow the power of a different technology. After a while, the royal dwarf master craftsman, Corgidus, sits in his room while drinking, refusing Lloyd Frontera before he even speaks. Lloyd responds that Corgidus hasn't heard anything yet. Corgidus asserts that he doesn't want to hear about it and instructs Lloyd to scrawl away. Lloyd thinks to himself that Corgidus is indeed a bull-headed old man, just as described in the novel. He notes that Corgidus doesn't move unless he's interested, even if it's a request from the queen. To capture his interest, Lloyd reveals that he has prepared a powerful weapon, blueprints for a new bridge over the Major River, specifically a truss design. Corgidus dismisses the human design, stating he has no interest in it. Lloyd apologizes and offers a blueprint, then leaves, expressing that he will entrust these plans to some other blacksmith. Corgidus places his bottle on the table and comments, "Wait, that design, if he doesn't get the structure rigidity exactly right, he knows what's going to happen." He explains that if the rigidity is off, the bridge will snap and collapse, and those on it will die. He fears being blamed for their deaths, with people shouting from the scaffold if only Corgidus had made the trusses. Corgidus becomes angry and questions if that's a threat. Lloyd laughs and reassures him that it's not a threat, but a plea to a master's conscience. Corgidus insists that Lloyd's face looks like a threat, demanding to see the blueprints. Lloyd hands over all the blueprints, and Corgidus examines them. Corgidus concludes that he's certain of one thing: he's the only person in the kingdom who could make this. He warns Lloyd not to give the blueprints to any other dunce, as it would result in a disaster. He responds that is why he feels threatened. He means to ask for his help. Corgidus inquires if he is still wearing that expression and instructs him to remove it. If he can design something like this, he must have planned it to pique his interest. He responds, expressing disbelief at his actions, and states that he can only rely on his warm-heartedness. Corgidus instructs him to stop that look and agrees to proceed. Lloyd Frontera bows and expresses gratitude, thinking that Julian is continuing work on the wires and that the Royal Workshop has initiated the bridge's truss work. He anticipates that Javier and he will commence work on the suspension towers. After a while, Lloyd Frontera and Javier work at their construction site. He instructs Javier to get ready to blast, and they proceed to blast the ground. A person in a blue dress arrives and commands them to stop the work immediately. They question how they dare defraud Her Highness, steal from the royal treasury, and assert that they will not allow him to get away with this. He asks for clarification, to which the person in the blue dress responds, pleading for him to pass judgment. They highlight that there is already a bridge on the Majna River that has stood for 30 years. Nevertheless, the man is creating unnecessary work to tap into the royal funds. They request him to punish the fraudster and suggest redirecting efforts towards repairing the palace instead. Alicia Termina Magentano declares that each side will state their case, beginning with the Guild and Builders Guild of Magenta City's leader, Victor. He asserts that the Majna Bridge, constructed by the previous guild leader, has stood in that spot for 30 years. The support columns are wedge-shaped to slow down the swift currents of the Majna River. He criticizes the notion that the bridge will fall, considering it a clear insult to the guild and a slight to Her Royal Highness, the Queen. Lloyd Frontera thinks, yet nope, if that bridge collapses, in the Night of Blood and Iron, there's a scene where the royal army and the rebels face off at the Majna River. He reflects on an event during a massive rainstorm where the bridge collapses, leading to a standstill. However, he refrains from mentioning future events. She instructs him to express his opinion. In response, he states that he would like to inquire something from the official seated beside the guild leader and asks how much they were paid. Another man exclaims how he dared make such false accusations in front of Her Royal Highness. Lloyd Frontera believes that his reaction speaks volumes. It's as if he is displaying signs of being paid off all over his face. He thinks that anyone familiar with Koreans knows what typically occurs when a politician and a businessman meet. Either the politician accepts money from the businessman, or the businessman bribes the politician while seeking favors. In this case, he believes it's the latter, stripping away all business rights and monopolizing the budget. She calls him again, bringing him out of his thoughts, and she asserts that she thought he was a clever man, but he has made a grave mistake by baselessly accusing a royal official. She shouts, "Listen, prepare his judgment at once." They capture him, tie him up, and the death warrior is almost killing him. She instructs him to listen well, as he has insulted her and a royal vassal with his lies, and now she will restore her honor. Javier arrives with Pipodong, Hameng, and Bangul, grabbing his sword. Alicia Termina Magentano asks him if he has any last words. He replies, "Exterminate the guilty one's entire bloodline." She asks Victor and the other person if they also agree with this. They bow and affirm that it is the right thing to do. She then declares that she will prove her vassal's innocence while Javier squeezes his sword to draw it. The other person questions what she is saying, and 4 magicians arrive to perform a magic spell on that person. Lloyd Frontera looks at him and smiles while she instructs them to summon the confession spell. The person pleads for them to wait, but the magicians have already completed their spell, and magical circles appear around him with a bright flash. After a while, that person and Victor find themselves tied up in the middle of the city under worse conditions, with crows flying around their heads. Lloyd Frontera arrives there with Javier and remarks that their families have done no wrong. He explains that he pleaded with the queen to only go this far, emphasizing his niceness. Lloyd thinks he was a bit annoyed that construction got delayed due to those worthless punks. Alicia Termina Magentano also arrives there and commands to put all of the kingdom's workers on the bridge's construction, making people hail their darling queen. Lloyd observes that the High Wizard used gravitational magic to lighten the weight of the stone blocks and work on the suspension tower, which finished in a flash. He instructs Bangul to get ready for the launch. Bangul holds the rope in his mouth and jumps from a building, and Lloyd tells him to fire. A blast occurs, catching everyone's attention. Pipodong and Bangul become excited by the blast, while 2 soldiers turn the tab again. Lloyd Frontera announces the socket connection complete, and here comes the second cable. Julian Frontera acknowledges Lloyd's incredible abilities, and Javier adds that he is also remarkable. Despite it being his first time engaging in hard labor, Lloyd showed up every day. Javier recalls a time when they were young, and he asked Lloyd to teach him how to use a sword. However, Lloyd nearly hurt himself because the sword was too heavy for him. Now, Javier observes that it doesn't seem to be a problem. Hemming supports a part of the bridge, and Lloyd Frontera mentions that wizards can also perform fire magic. Following his instructions, they execute the magic, and Lloyd places his shovel on the ground, announcing that the construction is complete. The system notifies that the construction of Magenta City's suspension bridge is finished, and a large amount of bonus RP will be awarded for this monumental achievement in construction. His bonus RP increases to 1,050, and his current RP reaches 3,019. He reflects that after saving bit by bit, he is now swimming in RP, feeling content. Alicia Termina Magentano reaches the bridge and declares that it will be named after Lloyd Frontera and his brave knight. She officially names the bridge Lajavi and, using her vested powers, bestows the title of Master Builder onto Lloyd Frontera. Corgetus, standing in the crowd, questions the decision, referring to Lloyd as a runt who made the whole platform but is the only one capable of designing something like this. He acknowledges that once the money for construction starts pouring in, it will likely settle the estate's debts. However, there is still one giant hurdle left. She contemplates how to utilize this man, considering there are numerous ways to put him to use. He reflects that the queen is currently debating how to employ him, but he absolutely refuses to comply. His dream is to be a rich bum, spending his days eating and sleeping. He decides to stick to the plan. She states that she has a request for him, suggesting they return to the royal palace and talk. He thinks about escaping the queen's grip while also addressing Julian's academy problem and responds, agreeing to her wishes. He names the plan Operation Double Kill. They all return to the royal palace where Alicia Termina Magentano proclaims that she hereby bestows upon Lloyd Frontera a noble title and an estate befitting his abilities. She contemplates that he is the son of a country baron, and on top of that, he caused the sanction of high-ranking officials like themselves. They cannot be happy about him being given a title and land, and it will be a pain to try and quell their complaints. Lloyd Frontera bows and expresses thanks and praise for Her Majesty's boundless generosity. However, if he may be so bold, he beseeches her for something bigger. She asks what's bigger, and he replies that if Her Majesty deems his request reasonable, then please withdraw the offer of land and title. She tells him to state his request, and she will decide, contemplating what he might want, whether a royal post or a larger fee. Whatever it is, it wouldn't change her desire to have him by her side. He states that what he would like is a thorough cleaning of the Royal Academy. She asks him to explain this. He responds that the Magenta Royal Academy is currently full of corruption, inequality, and despicable behavior. Students focus more on their cliques than their studies and subject students of lower ranks to mental and physical suffering. He mentions that the Academy's educators are aware of this, yet turn a blind eye, more interested in lining their pockets with kickbacks to satisfy their own interests. He adds that the students indulge themselves in the sweetness of power when they should be learning, and they build up social barriers when they should be embracing their aspirations for this world. These behaviors are a far cry from the aims with which the Academy was established. He issues an order to Javier, who takes out a document from his pocket and presents it to the Queen. He states that these are the results of a 4-month investigation that his knight and he have put together, ranging from Academy graduates to handymen who did odd jobs, down to the teachers with a conscience who had left, fed up with the Academy's corruption. He mentions that they have carefully recorded their testimonies and investigated their claims. A royal servant shouts that this lowly man is spewing lies, and another person chimes in, saying that such a thing could not happen at the Royal Academy. She orders those who just opened their traps to be subjected to the confession spell. Magicians arrive and create their magic circles with a bright flash on Academy administrators, and they all confess. After some time, they are all tied up in worse conditions in the middle of the city for punishment. Alicia Termina Magentano reaches the Royal Academy, while an announcement tells that Her Majesty is approaching, and her guards capture the staff of the Academy. She orders the arrest of all the people mentioned on the list, with no exceptions, even those they associate with or have the slightest connection to. She instructs that they should be given lashes according to their crime, relieved of their posts, and have their lands confiscated. She states that they should be prepared to face even execution. One of them claims he has done no wrong, while another one begs for mercy. Another person insists he is being framed, declaring it to be a setup. Lloyd Frontera and Javier stand outside the Academy, and he smiles while Javier remarks that he seems very pleased about cleaning out the Academy. He wonders what he is talking about. His darling queen has completely forgotten he exists. Now he just needs to sneak back to the countryside and enjoy the fruits of his labor, laughing. Kyle comes from behind and says he understands that he is pleased, but must he make that face? He adds that he has a message from Her Royal Highness, stating that he may go when he wishes, but he should be sure to attend tomorrow night's banquet. He agrees to that. Kyle continues, mentioning that she also says his plan to create a diversion with the Academy was outstanding, and she respects his wish to live the sweet, lazy life. He thinks that he was always in the palm of her hand. Kyle concludes that is all and walks away.